Hello. Formally and officially. Hello, Finn. Yes, everyone is very cute. And everyone is hopefully also very ready to learn some more grammar today. Okay? Our lesson is going to be all about wants and needs. So, let's jump in and see what it's all about. Alright, so today, I want to talk about 3 things, which are all sort of under one encompassing topic. And it's all about expressing wants. Okay, so what do you want? So we're going to talk about the Thai form, which I'm just going to call the Thai form. I mean, that's mostly what it's called. We're going to talk about hoshi, but mostly hoshi when it's used in conjunction with a te form. Okay, we're going to mostly focus on that because hoshi as an adjective is really easy. It just means an adjective for something you want. And then tagaru, which is yet another adverbial. Okay, so those are the 3 that we're going to talk about today. So yeah, let's get started. Basically, the whole point of today is how do I express something that I want to, like, do an action, like do action, right? What I mean is that this action is obviously, it's about verbs, okay? So today we're gonna talk about how do we say, I want to eat, I want to live, I want to run, I want to whatever. It's like desirable hoshi. Yeah, like hoshi just is an adjective that describes something that you desire, basically, yeah. Which also the dictionary will tell you as much. Let me just show you that as well. No transcode. Yep, no transcoding options, but I've set my bitrate really low today. We're only at 3K bitrate, so I hope that's low enough for everyone to just watch. I can't do anything about the encoding on Twitch. It's just out of my control. I'm sorry. Sorry, guys. Hey, if you want me to get encoding options, I don't know, call your friends, because if we get partners, that's how it works. So what I wanted to show you is, if you look up hoshi, you'll see, it means to want, wanted, wished. Yeah, so it's an adjective. And then this is mostly what we're going to talk about today, which is an auxiliary adjective. So I want you to do something. That's we're going to talk about this after we look at Thai. So Thai is interesting because Thai is the same as hoshi. It's also what you would call an auxiliary adjective. Okay, it attaches to the must stem. So first of all, Thai. Okay, 2 things that we need to know. The most important thing is how do we make the Thai form, okay? So basically for Thai, what you need to know is it's always verb must, which I mean the must stem, okay? Not the must form itself, must stem, plus Thai, okay? It is not too bad to figure out. You should know the must stem. I bring this up. If you don't know the must stem, go back to my verbs episode where I think we talk about polite forms. And I explain it there. It's not hard to form the must stem, but it's something that you need to know. So if you don't know that, once again, I encourage you to maybe go back. Let me just post a link. Here's the playlist, right? So it's fairly early on in there somewhere. Luckily, I have better internet in the new place. Ah, that's great. Perfect. So that's the formation. Now, oh man, this is pretty upbeat music, huh? I should probably switch to... Let me just see. Okay, there. Just do that. Should be better. So, the formation, 連用形だよね。そうですね。はい。連用形。The 連用形. That is the Japanese name for the must stem. So the formation is really easy. We just need to know the must stem. Now for ichidan verbs, right, as always, ichidan is very simple because you just have verb in here, ending with ru, and you just take away the ru and you add tai instead. Okay? Tai. So our favorite example, as always, tabetai. Well, taberu would just be tabetai, right? Very simple. And I would almost bet that if you've done any reading or listening practice, you have probably seen this form. You may not have quite understood what it is and where it comes from, but it is a very common thing to hear. Tabetai. So what does it mean? It just means this, right? Want to eat. I want to eat. 食べたい. I want to eat. That's what it means. I want to eat. Okay? 食べたい. For godan verbs, the story is much the same, just that you have to obviously be aware of how to make the must form of said verb that you're looking at. Verb must, right? It will be verb must. Must. And then tai. Now, of course, ichidan verbs without ru are also the must stem. It's just easier there. So let's make an example. If I want to sing, okay? If I want to sing, I would say 歌う. Okay, 歌う is spelled like this. Just hope I don't mess it up, but I'm pretty sure I remember it. Yeah, 歌う. So 歌う means to sing. 歌う. Like 歌 is a song. 告らせたい. Yeah, so 告らせたい is actually even another thing above that, which is taking the causative and then making that into the tai form, which you're also allowed to do because causatives have must stems, right? So 告らせる is to make someone confess, and 告らせます would be the must form. So 告らせたい is want to make someone confess. See how it fits together, right? Very, very Lego. It's all very Lego. Take one piece and put another on there, as long as it fits, as long as the pieces fit. And they do. So 歌 would be 歌います, which is to sing, and just the must form. So you have 歌い and then 歌いたい. Okay, which sounds a bit weird, but that's what it is. Okay, 歌いたい. I want to sing. 燃えます. Thanks for the follow. What a poignant, right? That's how you say it. What a poignant name for what I was just talking about. Yes, I appreciate that reference, Atha. So that's like a quick overview, but now let's dig a bit deeper. はい、フォローありがとうございます。let's dig a little deeper and actually look at some more specific examples maybe. So now the whole point of tai is really that you should use it for yourself, okay? That's like the main takeaway for tai that I can give you right away is, hey, use, I'm gonna make a little tilde. Tilde is just like meaning that it's attached to something, right? Just to use that something. Use tai for yourself. For when you want something, if you want to do something. Okay, not for what others want to do generally. That's like the general rule. I forgot how to read pancreas. Like it's not like sotsu or so. So I guess it's like something zo. I forgot. That's the main important part. Is like you should be really careful with using tai when it's in reference to what someone else wants to do. We'll look at that and how to express those things in a bit, but for now the main form of the main use of tai is talking about your own wants. What do you want to do, you know? And be like, well, I wanna run. Okay, so what if I wanted to say I want to run all the way to the school, and today we're back at my level. Really, I don't know, like, yeah, I guess, yeah, interesting. So if you wanted to run all the way to the school, you would say 学校まで学校まで走りたい right? 走りたい Let me see if I can Yes, I think I know it. Okay, it's like 土 on top of the foot radical, right? Yeah. 走りたい. Damn, I feel like my kanji writing is getting better. I'm remembering. The brain remembers. 走る is to run. Generally, but this is new. Understandable new. Nice, very good. So 走る means to run, which you'd write like this. Oop, well, that was weird. 学校まで走る means to run all the way to school, but 走りたい means I want to run all the way to school. So 走ります、走りたい. Instead of the must, we use tai. Voila. Now, a little footnote, actually. You can just add this to this again if you want to make it polite, okay? Why can you do this? Because tai kind of works like an adjective, okay? An e-adjective, to be precise. So you can kind of start treating this a little bit like maybe some sort of mixture between an e-adjective and the verb. Because the tai itself is like an auxiliary adjective. and hashiru is the verb, okay? So if we want to make this polite, we can just add this. That's the rule. Not hashiritaimasu or anything like that. Don't do that. Purge that from your brain if you've ever wanted to say hashiritaimasu or something like that. Oh, I just noticed that I should zoom in a little bit. And then maybe also, I feel like we're for some reason we've moved. Don't know why, but we have moved. Ladies and gentlemen, the move has begun. There. Can you explain the one, which part? Wait, give me a second. The beginning of this song always reminds me of Dark Souls because it's like, oh no, this thing is broken again. Ah, okay, I'm not doing that. I'm doing that later. I'm sorry, I'm not doing that. That is too much of a hassle right now. What is wrong with OBS? It always does. It always breaks. Can you explain the dash? Which dash? Atai to omoimasu. So I use a tilde for a placeholder when I mean that I attach something to something else, okay? So for example, I would say that you would attach mas, I would write it like this, because you're attaching it to a verb, okay? This is just like a placeholder for, hey, a verb goes here, right? Okay, I've answered my question, so you don't use hoshi for verbs. You can use hoshi for verbs, and we'll talk about that, but it works a little different. It's actually a te form rather than the mas stem. So yeah, you do use hoshi for verbs, but you use te form, and we'll talk about that in a bit. I just want to talk a bit more about tai. So, 学校まで走りたいです. I want to run all the way to school. Okay? Now let's talk about some ways in which this tai can actually show up. And one of the ways in which it can show up is as a negative, okay? And you need to learn to recognize that when it does show up. So for example, if someone said, I don't want to eat. Well, how do we phrase that? Well, it's really simple. I just told you, right, that... Yeah, 走りたくない, exactly. I just told you that the tai works like an e-adjective. Remember how to make the negative of e-adjectives? Well, I hope you do, because that's what we're gonna need now. If tai itself, okay, again, placeholder, okay, just when I do this, just imagine that there's some verb or something that I attach it to. Tai. Basically, if this is like an e-adjective, we just change e to ku nai, okay? So we change e to ku and then add nai. So basically we just end up with ta ku nai. Takunai. And this just is true universally. Whenever you use tai, that's just what you end up with. So we can make all kinds of formations with that. For example, 食べたくない. I don't want to eat. 食べたくない. 食べたくない. Don't want to eat, okay? 食べたくない. I don't want to eat. The rule about using it for yourself is still true. So you would still only say this for yourself most of the time. And luckily, nai, just like the negative form of verbs, you can just add this to that to make it polite again. So it is just the same as before. With this, we can make it polite. 食べたくないです. I don't want to eat. Alright? Okay. Now, a little exception to that rule of not using it for yourself is actually the magic of just adding to omo or to omoimasu. That is a little cheat. It's like a cheat code, okay? If you have some tai form like 食べたい. I just had that and I erased it. But yeah, if you had 食べたい and you wanted to say like, oh, I think he wants to eat, then you can actually do that. You can say 彼は食べたいと思います, right? So if you add like と思います, wow, you have to actually be able to write kanji though. 思います. Now that's fine. Cheat code, you make grammar sound like a game. Isn't it? Game grammar. 食べたい, so 彼は, imagine there's like a 彼は, like a he. He wants to eat, I think. Now that's better, because now, like, you're not making this straight up assumption about what somebody else is thinking or wanting or their desires. So it's more acceptable. So for that person, I want to eat him, I think. Yes, exactly. That's kind of where the whole don't use tai for other people comes from, by the way. It's all about, in Japanese, you're not supposed to make assumptions about what other people think, or especially what they feel or want or desire. That is considered rude. So, you try and refrain from like assuming to know what other people think. So if you add this qualifier of, oh, I think they want to eat, that's more acceptable. It's basically fine to say this. 彼は食べたいと思います. I think he wants to eat. Then they can at least like correct you if you're wrong. But if you just say 彼は食べたい, that's a bit strange because how would you know? Well, you in English you'd be like, yeah, but I asked him and he said he wants to eat. But that's sort of not how the notion works in Japanese. In Japanese, it's more like, you know, you can't possibly know what is in someone else's head, so it's rude of you to assume. Kind of. That's the whole thinking. That's the whole idea. Eva's the final boss. Am I? I would be an easy boss to beat. 食べたいと思います. Now, there's another thing that we need to talk about, and that's the difference between using ga and using o with 食べたい, or with tai in general. Excuse me. With using ga and o with the tai form. So I've said twice now that tai forms start acting a little bit like adjectives, and that is true in multiple ways. Number one is that they act like adjectives in as much that as you can describe an object with something like tabetai, and then that means I want to eat that thing. So the attribute of you wanting to eat it gets attached to that object using ga, just like it does with all other adjectives. I'll make an example with a normal adjective that we all know. For example, we can say something like kutsu. Kutsu means shoes. Whoa, guys. Kutsu. So kutsu is shoes. I'm not drawing the kanji. It's a bit annoying. Kutsu ga takai, right? Kutsu ga takai, and takai means expensive. Okay, kutsu ga takai. So the shoes are expensive. All right. Now, ga here tells us that. Wow. Ga tells us that kutsu is basically the subject, and this is the adjective. And the adjective to the subject acts like an attribute, so it describes it. Kutsu ga takai. The shoes are the thing that is expensive. Okay. In English, we would usually have to actually use some other verb, I think. Yeah. If we wanted to say the sentence, we would have to use like the copula. There is more or less a copula built into e-adjectives. We've talked about this when I talked about adjectives. So in English, we would say the shoes are expensive. Then are to be would be used copulaic. In Japanese, with e-adjectives, the predicate is already sort of built in, so you don't have to use a copula. With na-adjectives, you would have to use da for the sentence to make sense. For example, 部屋が静かだ. But 部屋が静か is not a finished sentence, but 部屋が静かだ or 静かです, that is a finished sentence. 靴が高い, that is a finished sentence. 靴が高いです is also a finished sentence, but there the this just acts for politeness. It sounds a bit complicated. Not really the topic of today's lesson, but don't worry. Really, you don't have to worry about this. What I do want you to think about is how adjectives work together with nouns using the ga particle, okay? That's sort of what you're supposed to remember now. 靴が高い, so it's the shoes that are expensive, okay? 何これ? 靴底が高いだと高いの意味が変わってくる. I could assume, right? Like the soles of your shoes or the bottom of your shoes are high up or something. So, now, what does this have to do with the tai form? I'm probably messing up the pronunciation of that, but I think it would be like 靴底 or something. 靴底. So, what does that have to do with the tai form? Well, like I told you, the tai can act a bit like an adjective, specifically an e-adjective. So, we can actually phrase things in this way. This tends to confuse people a bit, but it's, you know, generally, keiki, I like to use keiki. It's just a good... Everyone can relate to cake, right? Keiki ga tabetai, okay? I'm just gonna use white again. Keiki ga tabetai. Tabetai. Now, if you see this for the first time, you might be fooled into thinking, ga marking the cake as the subject. Cool. So want to eat is the action, and cake is the subject. So the cake wants to eat something. But obviously that doesn't make any sense. So in this case, it is actually more the fact that tabetai is acting a lot like an e-adjective that becomes an attribute to cake. So the cake is described by the fact that I want to eat it. So I want to eat cake. If you wanted to be more explicit about this, you could add watashi wa at the start. You'd be like, watashi wa keiki ga tabetai. I want to eat cake. Unfinished, yeah. So you can use ga with the Thai form to phrase these sentences, keiki ga tabetai, and then think of it more that like tabetai being like an attribute that you add to cake. So the attribute of you wanting to eat it. I know it's a bit phrasing wise, that sounds really complicated. But if you don't do this, you might be fooled into thinking that this means keiki ga tabetai, that the cake wants to eat something. Keiki o tabetai would be wrong. So this is where it gets really interesting, okay? Keiki ga tabetai. Now, the part where it gets really interesting is like, what about o? And I've done some digging, okay? So, keiki o tabetai. It's been a while since I've actually looked into this, but I still remember most of what I read back then. So it turns out that keiki o tabetai is generally considered correct as well. Keiki o tabetai. So there's a lot of debate. Okay, there's a lot of debate online. There's a lot of debate online about, especially in learning forums, whether this is correct or not. And I've looked up Japanese websites, and I've seen that the consensus in Japanese grammar in Japan seems to be that this is an okay thing to say, and both are okay, but ga is more common. Yeah, I think I even read. So generally, the difference is that o is a bit stronger. Like keiki o tabetai sounds a bit like a more emotional thing. Like it's a bit more emphasized, saying that like basically I want to eat the cake, like keiki o tabetai. There's really not much of a difference though, but that tends to be the general difference, that o is a bit stronger. Watashi ga keiki ga tabetai work, or only watashi wa. So that tends to not work because ga is usually only a thing that shows up once per clause. Nuance of action as ga is more of the thought. Yeah, that could be true as well. It's like very nuanced. Like it doesn't really matter. You can look into this. To me, so in my opinion, real quick about how do I choose. In my opinion, this is probably one of those things that you start choosing naturally once you get exposed to Japanese enough. Like once you get enough exposure, you're naturally sort of understand when it is natural to use one or the other. And other than that, I wouldn't worry too much about it, since they both basically mean the same thing. So yeah, and even when like listening or trying to understand, you can still kind of translate them the same thing. Now about like watashi ga keiki ga tabetai, the reason this is very strange is that ga works as a pretty strong like subject or target marker, and you can generally only have one of those subject/targets in one clause. And here we have two, so it becomes really confusing, because theoretically those particles should work as such that they give a fixed or a clear job to each of the words. But here we could take out keiki ga, and then it would mean watashi ga tabetai. It would mean like it's a bit weird. I think it's a bit weird. I think you would use, because so like this is where it gets complicated, right? Oh, Cisco, hey, welcome back. Thank you for the sub. Yeah, this is where it gets weird, because theoretically you could say watashi ga tabetai. I want to eat myself. Yeah, so like this could mean that I want to eat something that we don't mention. You could theoretically watashi ga keiki o tabetai. You can say that. Like that's where it gets like really annoying, because we're not talking about essentially we're not talking about the Thai form anymore. Now we're just talking about wa versus ga. Myself in Japanese. Glad I found this. I'm glad too. Well, yeah. Well, thank you for hanging out. So at this point, the discussion has become almost entirely about particle use again, and especially wa, ga, and stuff like that. So yeah, it's complicated, but not because of Thai. It's just because of ga and wa and stuff like that being a bit complicated. If you understand what I mean, right? We get into the discuss. It's like keiki ga tabetai. Yeah. I'm assuming the concept applies to all transitive verbs like kuruma ga kaitai. Yes. I mean, yeah, I think it was that. Wakarimashita. Yeah, I think having got twice, especially in the sentence that you said, is very unnatural. You probably just resort to using what for yourself as the topic then, just to make it sound less confusing. So yeah. It doesn't quite mesh. It doesn't quite work, sadly. Hey, my JNSN. I almost forgot the last N there. Horo, arigatou gozaimasu. Thank you so much for the follow. But the gist of it, okay? Again, it's one of those things, like, I would recommend you do a lot of, like, reading and listening practice, and then try and understand these forms when they show up. And then you'll just sort of naturally understand what people say and what they don't say, the more exposure you get. You can never, and this is life lessons with Eve, you can never learn all the ways a grammar point is used and all the exceptions and all the little nuances from, like, just reading about the grammar. It just doesn't work. You'll sort of read about the grammar, you'll think you understand, then you'll go out into the big scary world, you'll read, you'll listen, and you'll be like, oh damn, I don't understand. Maybe you'll review, and then you're like, okay, I think I get it now. And then a lot of more practice follows, and then eventually you'll be able to reproduce it in a natural way. That's just kind of how it is. So as long as you get a good takeaway of what it means and are able to identify it when you see it, that's basically my goal for these lessons. It's not as much enabling you to immediately use these grammar points, but enabling you to recognize and understand them enough when you see them. Enough so that you can make sense of what it is you're reading or listening to, or at least upon further review, enabling you to do that. Wingardium Leviosa. Whoa, I'm floating. So I hope that's somewhat clear, okay, with the Tai form. So again, takeaways for Tai. Generally, if you just use Tai, don't use it for others, use it for your own desires and wants. Number 2, if you add to omo, it becomes a bit more okay to say it for someone else. At that point, you can actually say it because you're just stating what you think. You're not stating a fact, that's fine. And number 3, you can use both o and ga, and they mean very similar things, just with o being maybe a bit more emotional and focused on, like, the actual action and what Moe said, I guess, and plus just o being a bit stronger. But generally they mean the same. And that's about it about Tai. There's really not much to it. So because someone, I think Senpai mentioned, was it Senpai? No, I don't know. Someone mentioned kokurasetai. Who said kokurasetai? Kokurasetai. ちょっと待って。Yeah, it was Senpai. Good. Yeah, it was me. There you go. Because Senpai mentioned that. I'll also mention this. Like I said before, generally, most things that can have a must stem can theoretically accept Tai. It's one of those things where you can always make it work if a form has a must stem. So if you can add must to a form, you can also add Tai. Whether that makes sense or not is dependent on context and if the combination makes sense at all. But like in kokurasetai, that's perfectly fine. We have a causative, kokuraseru, which has a must stem if we just take away the ru, and then we get to add Tai. And we can combine the nuance of a causative, make someone do something, and Tai, I want to. So I want to make you do something, if that makes sense, right? Kokurasetai, that's exactly what it is. And it even works with passive as well. For example, we could say something like, so tataku means to hit. Tataku means to hit something or to hit someone. So you could have tatakareru, which would be to be hit by someone else. So you could be tatakaretai, like I want to be hit by someone if you're like a masochist or something, right? So you see how you can combine these things. That's the tricky part, really, is all the combinations that you end up with. But yes, so it all works. It all works. And it's all the same rules. It's just a must stem. So that's Tai. Now let's talk about hoshi. So hoshi is going to be really simple for the most part. Hoshi is like we've already said, by itself just means it's an E adjective, and it's just that something is wanted or desired by you. For example, like コーヒーが欲しい 欲しがる 欲しがる is just basically the verb that belongs to 欲しい 欲しがる means that you're desiring something. Generally, I feel like 欲しがる isn't as common as 欲しい, but you do hear it. So you can say like 何かを I think 欲しがる is transitive, but I'm just gonna confirm real quick before I say something wrong. I want to hit, yes. 欲しがる I would assume it's transitive. Yes, okay, so 欲しがる is indeed transitive. So you can just say like 何かを欲しがっている何かを欲しがる Now, the main thing that I see 欲しがる used for is when you talk about other people, not about yourself actually. For you, because it's kind of the same thing as before. So it's kind of like もっとレッスンが欲しい Yes, more lessons. It's kind of the same thing as before, is that if you talk about yourself, you know for sure what your own desires are. So you can just say like, これが欲しい I want this. But if you talk about someone else, it's actually more common to say, 彼はもっとレッスンが欲しがっている Right? Or 彼がもっとレッスン Well, you could say レッスンを Right? レッスンを欲しがっている Because 欲しがる is pretty good to use for other people, especially because of that, the nature of it, that がる That がる ending is actually more of an auxiliary, and it means for something to appear as though. And that's also where たがる comes from, by the way, which we're going to talk about in a bit. Thank you for following Acroma, X-Acroma. フォローありがとうございます. Welcome. So that's how I would distinguish. I would say that 欲しい when you talk about yourself, yeah, like たがる is literally たい plus がる. So that's where it comes from. And 欲しがる is 欲しい plus like the garu part. So yeah. What I would say is, again, that generally for yourself you can just use hoshi, and then for other people you can say like, oh, they seem to want this, they seem to be desiring this, kind of like that. So that's where hoshigaru kind of comes in, I would say. I rarely hear people use hoshigaru for themselves. They would just straight up say hoshi because they know, right? They know about themselves. 欲しがりません勝つまでは何欲しがりま You don't want anything until you win. とんかつ Okay, so let's talk about 欲しい Okay, next is 欲しい 欲しい when used as like this, what I said before, auxiliary adjective, is very simple. You just add it to the te form. Okay, so you have any verb in te form. So I'm just gonna simplify that to like verb te. Okay, again, if you don't know how to make the te form, review it. I'm not going to explain it here because we've made a whole lesson about it. So yeah, either go review it on a website somewhere or go find the video. I will post. I hope you don't mind me spamming this link. But yeah, this is the playlist. It's I think it's before episode 10 or something. We made a video about the te form. So I'm not gonna do it right now. I expect you know it. But if you don't, that's also not bad. If you don't know it, just assume that what I say is true, and then later review how to actually make the te form of all those verbs. Twokon, thanks for the follow. フォローありがとうございます. So we use verb te form, which always ends in a te, of course, or a de. Te or de, right? Te, or I'm gonna make a slash. De, te or de, plus 欲しい. And that's really as easy as it is. Te 欲しい. What does that mean? That usually means I. Nice. This is again important. It's about what you want. It's not about someone else for now. We'll talk about that. But for now, it's usually for what you want. But now, it's not a thing that you want to do yourself. Now, it's you want someone else to do something. Okay? So I want, someone else. I'm just gonna do S. I now know SM for some. Wait, someone. SO. I can't believe I messed that up again. SO else. That's not how you spell else. Else to do. ... Okay, so that's how you use tehoshi. The verb is the action that you want someone else to do. Okay? It will be much easier if I give you an example. So, for example, I'm not gonna write 写真. This is annoying. I'm just gonna use kana here. 写真, okay? 写真を撮ってほしい. So 撮る means to take a picture. I think 撮る would have. I think 撮る, I guess, would be like this. Yeah. 撮ってほしい, okay? What does that mean? Basically translates to, we have like an implied 私は here at the start, I, but again, this is something that you're hopefully used to by now, is when you don't say 私は, you generally just mean you talk about yourself, right? You don't always mention that. It's a bit pleonastic to always mention that. It's not necessary. It's not natural in Japanese. If you don't mention it, you just mean yourself, okay? Especially with something like hoshi. It's very much assumed that you're talking about what you want. So basically that means I want, and I'm just gonna use you, could also be him or whatever. I want him to take a picture, but we're just gonna use you, okay? Doesn't really matter in this case. It's obviously dependent on context, this pronoun here in English. I want you to take a photo, okay? To take, or a picture. A picture. Now, we didn't specify of what. What? イブ食べてほしい。イブそう何を食べてほしいですか Oh, by the way, that's something I didn't talk about, but I just thought of it now. Using tai as a question is okay. You can ask someone if they want to do something. That is not rude. You can say like, there's like really formal and polite ways of asking it, but generally in most settings, it is totally okay to say like, 食べたいですか? 食べたいですか? Do you want to eat? That's fine. That's generally fine. There's like, I would say like, yeah, I would say that's like generally like a normal, like polite enough thing to say. If you want to be more polite than that, you're already like dipping into keigo, I guess. イベリコ豚を食べたい。何イベリコ豚? What's that? So, I want you to take a picture. Does that make sense, right? We have toru, to take a picture, in te form, plus hoshi, saying that I want you to do that, or I want him to do that, or her, or it, or whatever. Okay? That's the difference between using tai and hoshi. When you use tai, you mean that you want to do the action. When you use te hoshi, you mean that you want someone else to do it. Okay? 写真を撮ってほしい never means I want to take a picture. It always means I want someone else to take a picture. Okay? And again, you can actually use it as a question, just like I did with Seductive or with Taco when answering him. 食べてほしい. So, 何を食べてほしいですか? What would you like me to eat? If that makes sense, right? So I'm using it from their perspective, and I'm saying, what do you want me to do? So basically, I'm speaking from their perspective, saying like, what is the desired action that you want me to do? And then I can say that, right? I'm just taking their perspective in this case. Just like when I would use like 食べたいですか? I would say that from their perspective, like, do you want to eat, right? If that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. So in questions, it's generally okay, because, you know, 何を食べてほしいですか? Yeah, what would you like me to eat, right? 何を食べてほしいですか? That's basically how you would use it. So てほしい is fairly straightforward. Again, because of the nature of how these things work, everything that has a te form can take 欲しい theoretically, and that does include stuff like passive forms, and potential forms and stuff like that. It just depends on the context if it makes sense to say that. When I translate to, what do you want to eat? No, because. So, 何を食べてほしいですか? So think about, so here, when you're phrasing it as a question, you have to really keep in mind where the perspectives are. If you're phrasing it as a question, you're phrasing it from my perspective. So, 何を食べてほしいですか? Because think about this. 食べてほしい means you want someone to eat something. But you wouldn't ask that to yourself. You wouldn't ask yourself, what you want to eat because you already know. You can only ask me what I want to eat. But then 食べてほしい means that like someone else wants someone to eat something. It's when I try and explain it, it becomes confusing. What do you want to eat? 何を食べたいですか?何を食べたいですか?何を食べてほしいですか means like, what do you want me to eat? Right? Because 食べて when I say 食べてほしい, I want you to do it. When I say 食べたい, I want to do it. That's the difference. Does that make sense? 何を食べてほしいですかはあまり使わない言い回しやね。I guess, yeah, probably. Like, いやまあ、そのシチュエーションもなんかね、あまりこう、誰かに、その、何を食べればいいという指示を受けるのはあまりないでね。例えばこう、何の本を読んでほしいですかという例はもっとこう、自然、なんていうか、日常会話的。So if you had something like, what book would you like me to read, right? 何の本を読んでほしいですか Like, what book would you like me to read? Yeah, so grammatically these are exactly the same. It's just that what would you like me to eat is a bit weird because there is rarely a situation where someone else dictates what you have to eat and where you would ask like, hey, what do you want me to eat? But grammatically these are exactly the same. I want Eve to take a picture. Do I need to mark Eve with the ni particle? No, let me think. Eve さんが写真を撮ってほしい。違う。イブさんに、どうでしょう Wait, now I'm getting confused myself. This might be off topic. I just want to confirm. Is it correct to say 食べてください? Yeah, that's correct. That's like てください is just for please eat. たい desire and てほしい your desire. No. Both of them express your desire, but たい expresses your desire to do the action. 欲しい expresses your desire for someone else to do the action. It's not about whose desire it is, it's about who's doing it. It's about who's doing the action. That's the difference. Wait, how would you say I want Eve? Eve さんにケーキを食べてほしい。I think it would be に。どうでしょう Now I'm Eve さんと写真を撮ってほしい。I wanna take, yeah, 撮ってほしい。Oh, now we would say like, Eve さんと写真を撮ってほしい。I want Eve to take a picture together with me or something like that. And I have to think about it. Now I'm getting thrown off. The difference is actually who's doing it. The desire is mine either way. Yes. Except if it's a question, then you're changing the perspective. Then you're asking somebody else about their desire. So you have to like flip the whole perspective, right? If you're asking someone 食べたい, you're asking them about their desire for them to do the action. And if you ask 食べてほしい, you're asking them for their desire for someone else to do the action, if that makes sense. 写真撮りたいですか? Yeah. 写真撮りたいですか? Do you want to take a picture? What that would be. Sorry, we're getting really into the different examples. So I think you would use, once again, I think you would use に. イブさんに, yeah, I think you would use に. I'm getting a bit, I'm doubting myself a little bit, but I think you just use に. イブさんに写真を撮ってほしい. Yeah, I want to have Eve take a picture. イブさん, because all the other ones don't make sense to me, so it should be に. I would probably bet on に for now, but we should probably maybe look it up after the lesson to confirm. I got it though. Yeah, you got it. No, it's okay. I think that's a fair question. That is a fair question. Okay, that's it for てほしい, alright? Again, this is mostly, it's not hard, it's just a matter of getting used to it. You'll see it a lot, luckily. Both てほしい and たい show up a lot. And I feel like the more I talk about it, the more it seems confusing. It's really not that confusing. It's both of them just talk about your desire. It's just a difference in who's doing the action. So yeah. Let's talk about the last one, which is tagaru. I should not have made that line here because now I can't really... Oh boy. Let's see if I can like delete. Oh, damn. Good enough. Alright. Amazing. Let's quickly go to red. Let's talk about... Oops. What layer am I on? Hello? What did I do? Oh, wrong thing. There, tagaru. Tagaru is pretty simple, okay? tagaru is like tai, but this one is then specifically for other people. It's like the opposite. Tagaru, same as tai. Basically, instead of doing tai, you just replace i with garu. That's all you do. So if you know how tai works, you know how tagaru works. It's the same formation, just you have verb must stem, and then just instead of tai, you just get rid of i and add garu instead. And now it's more like saying, like you're saying like appears to me, right? Appears to me. This is sort of the implied part. Appears to me they want to something. Okay? 上に家に帰ってほしいですか? Do you want me to return home? Yeah, 親に帰ってほしいですか? Yeah. お家. I guess it'd be お家 in this case. So that's good that Cold pulled up that command there. So you can see garu is basically a suffix auxiliary thing that shows us it talks about appearance or how it makes you feel. To show signs of being, to feel, to think, to behave as if one were, to pretend, to act as if. Is it closer to I noticed? I wouldn't say noticed. I would say like more like you're talking about what someone is acting to. You're talking about what it appears to you. Like you see, okay, for example, right? If someone is like, you know, having their legs like really tight together and they're doing the little dance, they're like, oh, I think they want to go to the toilet. Like it seems to me. Yeah, exactly. Like it seems that's when you talk about interpreting behavior, interpreting again, like it says there, to show signs, right? This is based on your judgment. So for example, like if someone is staring at a piece of cake and they're like, whoa, they're staring at it, you could say like, keiki o tabetagatteiru. And then you're saying, oh, he wants to eat the cake. But implied you're saying, oh, he appears to me like he wants to eat the cake. That's very wordy. No one would say that in the translation. You just say, oh, he wants to eat the cake. Or I think he wants to eat the cake. You're making a judgment call at that point. Now, the difference is that you're not stating a fact. You're stating a fact, but you're not stating a fact about the other person. You're stating a fact about your perception, and that is fine. You're simply saying what your perception is. You are not stating a fact about knowing what the other person actually wants. You're just saying that factually, to you, they appear like they want it, right? So if we say like, あのケーキを that's not how you do no. あのケーキを I think I did. There. あのケーキを 食べたがっている. And I'm using teiru here because it's like an ongoing thing. They're currently in that state, right? So あのケーキを食べる turns into 食べたい turns into 食べたがる, right? So 食べ and then たがっている. Garu is a godan verb, so it just turns into がっている, okay? 食べたがってる. I'm gonna shorten it to てる here. 食べたがってる. Now you're just saying, my judgment is, that's sort of like implied, that person wants to eat this cake or that cake. They want to eat that cake, right? That's how you use tagaru. And garu in general, hoshigaru, kowagaru, all of these words that you may have heard before, a lot of them have their own dictionary entry. They're actually just adjectives combined with garu, okay? So you have hoshigaru, you have kowagaru, to be afraid of, to be nervous about, to be shy. Basically, with kowagaru, you're saying that someone is acting as though they are afraid. They're acting as though there is something kawaii, right? Basically. You also have, what's another one? There's a bunch more. I can probably use the wildcard. Garu, right? With the wildcard, we'll find a bunch more. Just gonna take a second for them to show up. Not magaru. Also not hirogaru. These are their own. Korogaru, tsunagaru. Some of these are their own verbs. That's different. Yagaru. Yagaru is also using garu. sort of to act as though you dislike something. Not these, not these. 可愛がる. 可愛がる is similar. It's all of those that are like adjectives by themselves. Yeah. Anyways, does it have a similar function to soul, like おいしそう? It is a bit like that. Yeah, I would say. I think garu is more straight up talking about the actions of someone else. Like the actions of someone else lead you to believe something. What is that? That's like right, またがる? 何これ? 聞いたことない。やがる. Yeah, yagaru I think is I don't actually even know how yagaru came to mean what it does. But yeah. やってやがったな. It is that, but it's also a bit like its own thing. I would almost call it its own thing. Is this similar to one of the uses of volitional form mentioned in a previous lesson? With the o tosuru. Yeah, maybe. Often some forms sort of do depend on your own judgment, like soul, like the garu, like with o to shiteiru, especially for other people, it does talk a little bit about like appearance and stuff like that. Often these things tend to come up when you're like talking about how something appears to you. It's like subjective. So yeah, I guess you could call it similar. It's a little bit about perspective and like subjectivity versus objectivity, I would say. Yeah, I would say the overlying topic here is really about subjectivity versus objectivity. Garu is a subjective thing. Just using tai is objective. And that's why you wouldn't do it for someone else, because you cannot objectively be sure what someone else wants. Really, you could ask them, I guess, but that's the thing, right? But that's tagaru. It's really simple. It's just if you really want to talk about someone else's wants or needs, or not needs or wants, but what someone else wants to do, and you don't want to say tai, you can say tagaru. It's better. That's generally accepted then. あのケーキを食べたがっている. They want to eat that cake, I think. Not observing what they want, but you can observe what you want. Yeah, you can observe what you want. Yeah, it's the same with like hoshi, right? Now, generally, you don't see te hoshigaru. That's not really a thing. Not that I would know. Not that I know of. Not te hoshigaru is not really a thing. All the tai hoshitagaru manga now. Yeah, I hope you do. That's the whole point, isn't it? Uma ni kijou suru. Kijou ni matagaru. Ara ara. So desu ka? He. That's interesting. Matagaru means apparently to ride on something. Okay, well, do you have any more questions? Because if not, then we're ending this lesson fairly soon. I've talked about sort of what I wanted to talk about. But yeah, these tai form, like the tais, the hoshis, they're very common. And try to keep in mind that they can show up as negatives as well. Hoshikunai, by the way, can also show up. Tabete hoshikunai, don't want you to eat it. I don't want you to eat something, right? Tabete hoshikunai. So yeah. Not lesson really. How did you search multiple entries in the garu earlier? Oh, most dictionaries support wildcards and or specific types of wildcards. For example, this is true for Lorenzi's dictionary and jisho.org. A asterisk is a multi-character wildcard, which means that it can be as many characters as you want. But this, by the way, is explained kind of down here, so you can see partial search. But to give a bit of a more detailed explanation, so an asterisk replaces an undefined amount of characters. So this could be as many kana as we want, or kanji. And then you could do like, and I want it to end in ka. This now does a search in the dictionary of all words of arbitrary length that end in ka. So you can see shizuka, rouka, kokonoka. You can see they have different lengths, but they all end in ka. Similarly, I can search a list of all words that start with like tsu. Same thing. Okay, it does take longer because see, you can see it found like 2008 plus results. The other option you have is question marks. Question marks are single wildcards. So a question mark is a wildcard. It can be whatever character, but it can only ever be one. So basically, if we wanted a word that uses exactly one kanji and ends in teki, now we'll see all the words that use exactly one kanji or a kana, it doesn't really matter, exactly one character and then just teki. Okay, so you can see all of these will just be like 2 characters. See? So those are so-called wildcard searches. They're very useful. Also, by the way, if you're playing shiritori, you can always win at shiritori. If say like you're playing shiritori and your word is like ka, you can just do ka asterisk, and then you can just choose what you want it to end in, and you can be like, well, I just want it to end in ka again. So now you have all words that start in ka and end in ka. It's that's how you cheat at shiritori. I just told you now. They're kasuka. So if you want to just keep giving a person the same character to start on, you can do that. I don't really know why it found haha here, but it must be there, humble kaka. Yeah, it finds alternate readings as well. Kateka. Kashou hyoka. Anyways, that's my shiritori cheat, but it's also just in general very useful. Like if you're wanting to look for some pattern, or if you want to see, like generally, like I think in general it should already work for like when you just use teki, right? It should already show you like partial search results. See, it already shows you kind of what the kanji shows up in, but it's good to when you want to be more specific. When I only want those that end in teki, right? So it's good to like for this kind of stuff. It's nice, and you can be a bit more specific in your search. All right. There's that. I guess that's part of the lesson, but this is good info, so I'll leave that in. I think it's generally very useful when you're doing dictionary searches. I think, by the way, that this is a SQL thing. Correct me if I'm wrong, someone who knows more. But I think this is just a carryover from SQL-based functionality. Isn't it? I think so, right? Because as far as I know, like these searches are generally done with like, well, they used to be SQL. I don't really know if SQL is still being used, but yeah. Because I think that's how it works there. So yeah, anyways. So that's why it's so unified and tends to be the same for a lot of places. I may be wrong. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah. Alright guys. Phew! Quick breather. Alright. Thank you so much. Hey, lesson's over. We'll do some reading. We'll do some light reading on the Discord server in a bit. So I hope you stick around for that. Thank you so much.